In my 30 years of experience as a mechanic, I can say with certainty that there's a false sense of security when we buy a modern car. We believe the technology is so robust it can withstand any abuse, but the reality is that we're surrounded by parts that operate within micron tolerances and at temperatures that would melt steel. That's why today we're going to expose the 18 most critical errors happening right now under your hood. Failures that don't usually trigger warning lights on the dashboard until the damage is irreversible. We're not here to give cleaning tips, but to analyze the physics, chemistry, and engineering behind mechanical failure. Get ready, because we're going to reveal why those habits you consider normal are, in reality, a death sentence for the silent agony of your engine and transmission. Let's begin. Ignoring the break-in period in new or recently rebuilt engines, there is a dangerous belief that modern engines come ready to run from the factory, but this is a technical fallacy that ignores the laws of friction. When an engine is new, or when it has been rebuilt, the internal surfaces of the cylinders and piston rings have microscopic ridges resulting from the machining process. The break-in period, generally the first 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, is the time these parts need to marry each other through controlled wear. If you subject the engine to high revolutions or a constant load on the highway during this time, you prevent the piston rings from sealing properly against the cylinder walls. The result is an engine that will consume oil for its entire life and will never reach its rated power. The myth of idling. This is perhaps the most destructive and widespread habit in history. Many drivers start their car and let it idle for 10 minutes in front of their house to warm up. In the age of electronic fuel injection, this is mechanical suicide. When idling, the engine isn't generating a load and therefore takes much longer to reach its operating temperature. During this extended cold running period, the computer injects a rich fuel mixture to keep the engine running. This excess gasoline acts as a chemical solvent that washes away the lubricating oil film from the cylinder walls. Without this protective layer, the piston rings rub directly against the cylinder metal, causing massive abrasive wear, known as cylinder liner scoring. The correct way, approved by high-performance engine engineers, is to start the engine, wait 30 seconds for the oil pressure to reach the cylinder head, and then begin driving gently. The engine then warms up evenly and quickly under load, minimizing cold running time. Leaving it on without moving is literally pouring solvent on the heart of your machine every morning, using tap water or low-quality coolants. The cooling system isn't just a water circuit, it's a living chemical battery. When you use tap water or those cheap colored liquids sold at supermarkets, you're introducing minerals and electrolytes into an environment composed of different metals: aluminum in the cylinder head, iron in the block, and copper in certain radiators. This creates a phenomenon called galvanic erosion. The coolant becomes acidic and begins to carry metal ions from one part to another, eating away at the engine from the inside out. I've seen aluminum cylinder heads with holes so deep they look like Swiss cheese, all to save a few dollars on a high-quality organic acid technology coolant. Furthermore, tap water deposits scale and limescale in the narrowest passages, creating hotspots that the temperature gauge on the dashboard will never detect in time. Turn off the engine immediately after a long trip. If your car has a turbocharger, this point is your mechanical Bible. The turbo spins at speeds that can exceed 200,000 revolutions per minute and operates at temperatures up to 900 degrees Celsius. While the engine is running, oil circulates constantly, cooling and lubricating the turbo shaft. The fatal mistake occurs when you stop after a highway drive and turn off the engine immediately. At that instant, the oil pump stops, but the turbo continues to spin due to inertia at extreme temperatures. The oil trapped on the shaft instantly cooks, turning into a solid carbon deposit called coking. Over time, this carbon residue acts like sandpaper, destroying the turbo's bearings and shaft until it explodes, sending pieces of metal directly into the engine's intake, overloading the vehicle. A car has a maximum authorized weight for a structural engineering reason. When you exceed that load, whether by towing something the car wasn't designed for or filling the trunk with heavy materials, you're subjecting the transmission to torque it wasn't designed for. The automatic transmission fluid literally begins to boil. For every 10 degrees, the transmission fluid temperature rises above its optimal range. The life of that fluid is cut in half. The extreme heat degrades the internal clutches and hardens the rubber seals, causing the gearbox to slip. But it's not just the transmission. the suspension suffers elastic fatigue. The shock absorbers work at the limit of their travel, and the rubber bushings tear under the constant pressure. Overloading the car is like forcing an athlete to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks. Sooner or later, the mechanical ligaments break. It's a silent error because the car seems to be able to handle it, until one day the transmission gets stuck in neutral and the repair bill reminds you that the laws of physics are not suggestions. Don't neglect to change your brake fluid. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it has an almost magnetic ability to absorb moisture from the air. Over time, that clear fluid turns dark and becomes saturated with water. This is a death sentence for your car's most important safety system. First, the water lowers the fluid's boiling point. In an emergency stop, the water turns to steam, the pedal goes to the floor, and you lose the ability to stop. But the silent damage happens much sooner. The water in the system corrodes the brake caliper pistons and the delicate valves in the anti-lock braking system, ABS module. I've seen $3,000 ABS modules become unusable because the owner never spent $30 to change the fluid every 2 years. The internal valves become clogged with rust and deposits, leaving the car unable to modulate braking on slippery surfaces. The habit of driving with the tank on reserve. Many drivers see the low fuel light as a challenge, but engineers see a fuel pump crying for help. In modern cars, the fuel pump is submerged inside the tank. It's not there just for space. It's there because the gasoline itself acts as a coolant and sound insulator for the pump's electric motor. When you consistently drive with less than a quarter of a tank, the pump is exposed to the air and stops dissipating heat properly, which burns out its internal windings. In addition, there's the problem of cavitation and sediment suction. Particles and water condensation accumulate at the bottom of the tank. When the level is low, the pump sucks up this mechanical sludge, saturating the filter and forcing the electric motor to work under massive stress. Mixing oils of different viscosities or bases. Motor oil is a complex chemical recipe of polymers, detergents, and friction modifiers. When you decide to top up a high-end synthetic oil with a cheap mineral oil of a different viscosity because it was what they had at the gas station, you're creating chemical instability inside your engine. Additives from different brands and bases can react with each other, causing the oil to thicken prematurely and form what in engineering is called sludge. This sludge is a black, sticky substance that blocks the engine's lubrication channels and clogs the oil pump screen. Once sludge forms, the engine begins to suffer from oil starvation in the upper parts, such as the camshafts. It's a slow death by mechanical malnutrition. The engine may continue to run, but metal wear increases tenfold. Never, under any circumstances, should you mix oils with drastically different specifications. It's better to wait and buy the right oil than to create a chemical soup that will end up clogging the vital arteries of your engine. Ignoring accessory belt noises. That high-pitched squeal you hear when starting your car in the morning is no minor annoyance. It's the cry for help from a bearing that has lost its lubrication. The accessory belt drives the alternator, water pump, and power steering. If one of the tensioners or bearings seizes due to heat and friction, the belt will disintegrate in seconds. In many modern engines, when the accessory belt breaks, pieces of rubber can get behind the crankshaft pulley and fly into the timing belt housing. If this happens, the engine timing is thrown off, the pistons collide with the valves, and the engine is destroyed in a split second. What started as a $10 bearing noise that you could have replaced in half an hour turns into a $5,000 engine rebuild. Ignoring unwanted noises is the cardinal sin of mechanics. A car in good condition should sound clean. Any squeaking, whining, or knocking noise is a warning that entropy is winning the battle and your car is about to suffer a catastrophic failure. So far, we've analyzed how daily habits and misguided cost-saving decisions are eroding the integrity of your vehicle's most expensive parts. But the damage doesn't stop at the engine. Washing the engine with a pressure washer. There's an aesthetic obsession with seeing the engine gleaming, as if it just rolled off the showroom floor, but applying high-pressure water under the hood is one of the most dangerous practices in the age of advanced electronics. Modern engines are riddled with sensors, control units, and connectors that, while designed to be resistant to splashes and ambient humidity, are not built to withstand the force of a pressure washer at close range. The water pressure overcomes the rubber seals of the connectors and penetrates the copper pins, initiating an invisible process of galvanic corrosion. Weeks or months later, you'll start experiencing misfires, warning lights illuminating for no reason, or worse, short circuits in the engine control unit that can cost thousands of euros. I've seen cases where moisture gets trapped inside the spark plug wells, causing electrical arcing that destroys the ignition coils, not cleaning the chassis drains. Your car is designed to manage rainwater through a complex network of internal channels and drains that run through the pillars, battery compartment, and fenders. The silent mistake is forgetting that these drains become clogged over time by the accumulation of leaves, dirt, and car wash wax residue. When this happens, the water doesn't drain away from the chassis. It stagnates in blind spots where there is no ventilation. The result is structural corrosion that rots the metal from the inside out. Even worse, many of these channels run close to major wiring harnesses or the vehicle's computer. I've seen cars flooded inside, with mold destroying leather interiors and comfort electronics simply because a 2mm drain under the windshield was blocked. It's death by mechanical drowning. Incorrect tire pressure. Most drivers see tires simply as rubber that wears out, but for an engineer, they are the first component of the suspension and a critical part of the drivetrain. Driving with incorrect tire pressure, even by just 3 or 4 pounds, alters the effective rolling diameter of the wheel. In vehicles with all-wheel drive or modern stability control systems, this difference in diameter forces the differential to constantly work to compensate for the difference in speed between the wheels, even when driving straight. This overheats the differential oil and accelerates the wear of the internal gears until they break. Furthermore, an underinflated tire doesn't absorb shocks. It transmits them directly to the suspension's bushings, ball joints, and bearings, cutting their lifespan in half. It's a basic maintenance error that destroys the most expensive components of the drivetrain. Tire pressure isn't just an aesthetic suggestion. It's a technical specification for load and traction that maintains the harmony of the entire car's powertrain. When a tire is underinflated, its effective radius decreases, meaning that the wheel has to rotate more times than the others to cover the same distance. In modern vehicles equipped with intelligent all-wheel drive, AWD systems or active traction control, this discrepancy is detected by the ABS speed sensors. The computer interprets this as a wheel slipping and constantly engages the center differential clutches or applies selective braking to correct a non-existent loss of traction. This unnecessary effort generates intense heat in the differential fluid, degrading its lubricating properties and accelerating the wear of the planetary and pinion gears. The mistake of lubricating components that should work dry. There's a mistaken tendency to believe that more lubrication is always better. But in the world of mechanics, there are components designed to work dry or with specific Teflon coatings. A classic mistake is putting grease or oil on seat rails, exposed door latches, or even worse, brake caliper bolts without using the appropriate silicone lubricant. Ordinary grease is a magnet for road dust and grit. When mixed, the grease becomes an abrasive paste that acts like coarse sandpaper, eating away at metal and plastic bushings in record time. I've seen steering racks destroyed because someone decided to put grease in an area that should have been clean, trapping particles that ended up scratching the hydraulic seals. Technical obsession tells us that each part has its specific lubricant, and using the wrong one, or using it where it shouldn't, actively accelerates abrasive wear, turning a smooth-running mechanism into a dirt trap that will eventually seize or break. In materials engineering, there's what we call solid or controlled interference lubrication. Many components, such as polyurethane bushings, nylon rails, or plastic ventilation system actuators, are designed to operate without external additives. When you apply lithium grease or penetrating oils to these areas, a chemical betrayal occurs. The lubricant's solvents often attack the molecular structure of the plastics, making them brittle or excessively soft. But the real danger is debris trapping. The grease acts as an adhesive for silica dust and ambient metal particles, creating an abrasive slurry that eats away at the contact surfaces. I have witnessed power steering racks ruined because the owner lubricated the dust boots with oil, causing the rubber to swell and allow sand to enter directly into the high-pressure seals, ignoring steering wheel vibration. That small vibration you feel at 100 kilometers per hour and try to ignore is actually a constant hammering on the integrity of your vehicle. Many believe it's just a poorly balanced tire, but if the cause is a wheel bearing with play or a slightly bent rim, The damage spreads like a virus throughout the system. This parasitic oscillation fatigues the steering linkage, damages the rack seals, and, most seriously, causes uneven wear on the brake discs, which will eventually warp them. It's a domino effect. The vibration destroys the bearing damages the hub affects the wheel hub, and finally, you end up with €1,000 repair for something that could have been fixed with a €20 wheel balancing. In engineering, vibrations are unwanted energy that must be dissipated. If the tire doesn't absorb it because it's faulty, the car's structure will, and metal has a fatigue limit that, once reached, causes structural cracks impossible to repair safely. Vibration is kinetic energy that hasn't been properly channeled, and in a car, that energy always seeks the path of least resistance. If you ignore that slight tremor in the steering wheel, you're allowing an oscillating force to repeatedly strike the steering rack and the valves of the hydraulic or electrical system. This vibration acts like a microscopic jackhammer on the wheel hub bearings. When a bearing begins to fail, it generates frictional heat that can reach temperatures high enough to melt the internal grease seal. Don't use the air conditioning in winter. The air conditioning system isn't just for heat, it's a vital dehumidification system for safety. The silent mistake is leaving the system off throughout the winter months. The air conditioning refrigerant travels mixed with a special oil responsible for lubricating the compressor and, above all, keeping the rubber seals and gaskets throughout the system hydrated. When the system isn't turned on for months, the oil settles, the seals dry out and become brittle, allowing the refrigerant gas to escape through micropores. By the time summer arrives and you decide to turn it on, the system is empty, or the compressor seizes due to lack of initial lubrication. Engineers recommend turning on the air conditioning for at least 10 minutes every 2 weeks, even with the heater on. This maintains the system's air tightness and prevents astronomical repair bills for leaks that are impossible to locate. It's a free maintenance habit that preserves one of the most complex and expensive systems in your car. A vehicle's air conditioning system is a closed, high-pressure network that relies on constant circulation to function. The refrigerant doesn't travel alone. It carries a charge of PAG or POE oil, which is vital for the compressor's health. When the system is left unused during the colder months, this oil settles at the lowest points in the circuit due to gravity. As a result, the nitrile seals and O-rings at the pipe connections lose their protective film, allowing the rubber to shrink and crack. When you finally turn on the air conditioning in the spring, the gas instantly escapes through these microscopic cracks. Furthermore, the compressor experiences a dry start, where its internal pistons rub against the unlubricated walls for a few critical seconds, performing oil changes based on time while ignoring hours of use in heavy traffic. This is the great deception of modern owners' manuals that promise changes every 15,000 or 20,000 kilometers. These numbers are calculated for ideal highway driving, but the reality for most drivers is urban traffic, short trips, and endless hours idling. Under these conditions, the engine is running, the oil is degrading due to heat and fuel contamination, but the odometer isn't moving. A car that spends 2 hours a day in a traffic jam may only be traveling 20 kilometers, but its oil is suffering the wear equivalent of 100 kilometers of highway driving. Ignoring engine hours and relying solely on mileage is allowing the oil to turn into black sludge inside the oil pan. The obsession with longevity demands that if your driving is primarily urban, you reduce the change intervals by half. Oil is cheap, a new engine is not. Changing the oil based on your actual usage, not on an optimistic figure in a sales brochure, is what separates a car that lasts 300,000 kilometers from one that dies at 100,000. Oil degradation is a thermal and oxidative process that doesn't stop when the car is stopped at a traffic light. In urban traffic in large cities, an engine can run for 300 hours to cover barely 5,000 kilometers. During that time, the oil has been subjected to constant thermal cycles, contamination from condensation and, most seriously, dilution by fuel due to prolonged idling. Unburned fuel leaks past the piston rings and into the oil pan, breaking down the oil's viscosity and reducing its ability to maintain the hydrodynamic wedge that protects the crankshaft bearings. The wrong technique for going over potholes. There are 2 ways to go over a pothole, and both can be wrong. The most common mistake is to brake hard right over the pothole. When you brake, the car's weight is transferred to the front axle, compressing the springs and leaving the shock absorbers with no usable travel. When the wheel hits the pothole in this state, the energy isn't absorbed by the suspension but is transmitted directly to the chassis, the shock absorber mounts, and the steering rack. This causes the internal shock absorber valves to bend or the seals to burst from the sudden hydraulic pressure. The correct technique, approved by advanced driving instructors, is to brake before the pothole and release the pedal just before impact, so that the suspension is loose and can use its full travel to absorb the shock. Ignoring this will destroy your tires, throw off your steering alignment, and stress the front-end components on every rough road. It's a matter of mass and force management that most people ignore, paying the price with shock absorbers that last a fraction of what they should. The interaction between the tire and an obstacle is a massive energy transfer that must be managed by the springs and shock absorbers. When you brake over a bump, you block the suspension's ability to recoil. The springs are already under maximum load, and the damper fluid can't flow through the internal valves quickly enough. This creates a hydraulic pressure spike that can burst the shock absorber seals, leaving the car without rebound control. But the structural damage runs deeper. That impact force, not being dissipated, travels through the steering arms to the rack. The fatal error of lifetime maintenance. We've arrived at the original sin of the modern automotive industry. Many manufacturers label their transmissions and differentials as sealed for life or with lifetime oil. This is a marketing lie designed to reduce the apparent cost of ownership during the first few warranty years. No oil lasts forever. Transmission fluid suffers shearing, thermal oxidation, and contamination from metallic microparticles from the clutch discs. When that oil degrades, the transmission begins to fail, shifts become harsh, and eventually the gearbox dies. For the manufacturer, the life of the car is 150,000 kilometers. If you want your car to last longer than that, you must change that fluid. Ignoring changing the transmission and differential oil is signing the death warrant of the most expensive component after the engine. A fluid change every 60,000 kilometers is a minimal investment compared to the €6,000 cost of a new transmission. This is the ultimate negligence, the mistake mechanics see every day in cars that end up in the junkyard because of a decision the owner made based on a marketing label and not on the reality of tribological engineering. This is the ultimate monument to planned obsolescence by omission. The industry has convinced millions of users that modern automatic transmissions are black boxes that require no intervention. This is a physical fallacy. Transmission fluid is a working fluid that transmits power through the torque converter, cleans friction residue from the clutches, and cools the complex valve body. Over time, heat breaks down the molecular chains of this fluid, causing it to lose its ability to maintain the precise hydraulic pressure needed for gear changes. The result is accelerated wear of the friction discs, which ends up contaminating the entire system with metallic particles. With these 18 mistakes, we have mapped the path to your vehicle's destruction or immortality. The difference between a car that becomes a bottomless pit of expenses and one that faithfully serves you for decades is not the make or model, but the depth of your technical knowledge and your ability to ignore the myths of easy savings.